Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We have an exciting panel discussion coming up. The topic on talent acquisition and engagement challenges amidst the pandemic. Okay, if you have any questions that you would like the panelists to discuss, please put it in the Q&A chat instead of the chat box, so our panelists can pick it up from there. And I'll pass on the time to the MD and CEO of Avvanz to introduce the panelists.
Hi all. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning for those joining us from the European region. Thanks for making time in this time of the year when I'm sure a lot of you are trying to clear leaves. Maybe not so much you're going for a holiday, unfortunately, but I'm sure you're trying to spend more time with family. And amidst all that, making time for this webinar, thanks for that. So we have an interesting topic to chat, and the number of people registered for this event definitely very encouraging. And we saw that a lot of you were actively asking us a lot of questions for us to discuss. So we have tried to put together a lot of your questions into this panel. So this is not going to be a product demo kind of a discussion, which I'm sure nobody likes. So this is going to be a free-form chat, and I've got an amazing panel of speakers on board. So we're going to have fun. After all, it's almost for the European regions, probably start of the day, but for the Asia, at least, I think it's towards the end of the day. So let's have fun with this. So let me talk a little bit more. So I'm the co-founder and managing director of Avvanz Private Limited. Let me just move my slides a little bit. Yeah. So the context of this discussion, as you know, is about talent engagement, talent acquisition challenges, right? And a lot of you, as I saw through the participants list, you take care of businesses, you take care of people. After all, people are the critical assets of your business, right? And in times like these, very tough times, in fact, this week they were talking about the birthday anniversary of COVID-19, right? I think all of us are looking forward to celebrating the death anniversary of COVID. I know it's a morbid way of putting it, but I think that's all we want. But this COVID definitely has thrown up a lot of different kinds of challenges, issues for which there's no playbook. And I'm sure you've attended enough webinars talking about that. So I'm not even going to go near there. But in whatever times there is, the typical issue is when you're hiring someone, when you're bringing someone on board, you want to make sure the person is a right fit, right? Is this person really a right fit? Is this person even safe to hire? Statistics show that in times of crisis or recession, people actually pad up their resumes big time to get a job. Unfortunately, there are a lot of good talents out there who are looking for the right role, but at the same time, they might also be inflating their credentials to get a job. So there are a lot of challenges associated with that, and how do we counter that, right? And then once the person is hired, you want to make sure that they get productive to the floor very quickly. So you need very tight onboarding programs as well, right? And today, when there's a hybrid work environment, some are working from home, some are going to be working from remote offices. So there's a lot of hybrid working going on. So how do you really make sure they're onboarded effectively? There's a Gallup study which says that people who are not onboarded properly tend to leave the company within about 6 months, right? And that's not good for attrition. I mean, we spend a lot of time, effort, and money to onboard people. We want to make sure they stick with the company and they contribute, right, to your KPIs. So that's where the training and development also comes in. And today is not about training and developing people. It's also about engaging people. And I myself have been in a lot of events where I've spoken about, how to engage all the different generations. You have your millennials, you have your Gen X, Gen Y, Boomer, all that, right? So how do we make sure everyone is productive, everybody is engaged? And there's also a lot of mental stress people are going through amidst the crisis. It's cruel enough not to be able to go for a holiday, but it's also extra stressful when, there's a lot of social stress, family stress. my brother was a lawyer, was a divorce lawyer and family lawyer, sorry, I shall not say divorce lawyer. He said that divorces have been on the rise, number of cases going up. So I think there's a lot of social issues, family issues, how people can manage all this mental health, right? And then also contribute to the company. So it's a lot of things going on, which probably we've never seen before, right? And we're going to talk about some of these things in this tight 1 hour session. So very quickly, only a couple of slides on Avvanz. I think there's the least I should do for the company. So we are a global company. We're HR tech as well as fintech company. So our one of the key pillars is screening. So we do background checks on people. It could be any kind of background check across 150 plus countries. We also do company due diligence. We use artificial intelligence to vet resumes in minutes. We use, again, a lot of technology to onboard and train people. So other than being a fintech company in Singapore, we're also a WSQ training organization. So the government sort of funds companies to go for a lot of digital transformation, digital economy geared training solutions with Avvanz as well. So it's really screening, onboarding, and developing. That's what we do, but we leverage technology very heavily. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well, because a lot of these processes can be very manual. When it's manual, it comes with its own challenges, which is why we leverage technology very heavily, right? And like I said, these are some of the accreditations that we have and the recognition we've got as a global company in the space that we work. All right, enough of talking about Avvanz. Now let's get to work, all right? So myself, very quick introduction of myself. So born, bred Singapore, worked out of US, Canada, Poland, in different parts of my life. So as somebody who has led businesses in different geographies, I know the people challenges, right? So I'm sure a lot of it, you guys go through it as well. Other than that, if you Google my name, you'll also see me quite actively speaking about people, digital transformation, digital economy in newspapers, regularly contribute in Business Times. I speak about it in various conferences, TV media as well. And as my way of giving back to the community, I also do a lot of mentoring for startups and various platforms. So quite easy to catch me. So anytime connect me on LinkedIn if you want to have a chat. I love meeting people. That's what I think is the best part of this of my business, right? So now I'm going to bring on my esteemed panel. This is a time of the year. It's probably very busy for them, but these guys, amazing guys, they've made some time for Avvanz, and they are going to contribute insight. So first we have Vicky. She's a Chief People Officer from Singlife. She has got, you spend about 5 minutes with her and you get infected with all the energy. So that's what she is. She's a contagious, enthusiastic lady. A lot of passion. She reads a lot, and I try to spend my time whenever I'm feeling a little bit down. Just listen to her voice, and you get pumped up. So that's Vicky for you. And I think you recently might have read the news about Singlife and Aviva, and there's a lot of exciting things going on. I think she's at the point whereby with Singlife, all these dynamic changes. I think her job is going to be super interesting. So I want to check whether she's going to get wrinkles 6 months later. But with all the laughing and the smiling, probably she's not going to get it. So thanks, Vicky, for joining us. And then we have got Jeremy from Justlogin. Justlogin is probably one of the first few HRMS companies I know from many years ago. Today, there's quite a lot, but I think they're one of the pioneers in this industry. I know the CEO very well, and we do a lot of events with them. We've integrated our background screening platforms and learning platforms with them. And Jeremy brings with him as a person, as a HR leader, working in such an exciting HRMS company. He's going to bring his insights as well. So thanks, Jeremy, for joining. He was just telling me before the call that he travels about 4 to 8 times a year on holidays. So he probably has the same issue as me, all stuck in a small island. So, and then we have Alvin. You can call him my roti prata buddy. He knows where to eat. Like all Singaporeans, we're all big foodies. And you can see he's got a lot of banking experience, and he's going and as a voice of SHRI, he works with a lot of HR professionals around the country and a lot of companies. So he's going to bring a lot of valuable insights out. I'm going to treat him as a proxy for many companies who cannot make it to this panel, right? I can't bring 100 companies into this panel, so he's going to be that guy who's going to represent that voice. So very excited to have Alvin. Thanks for that. Next, we have Alan joining us from Melbourne with the 3-hour time difference. I was just telling him that it's probably his wine time, but he's making time for us, so I appreciate that. OC Tanner as a company does an introduction. We all know they are a leading company in the employee recognition and engagement space. And you can see he's worked in multiple industries. So he's going to bring a lot of ideas and perspectives as a person, not only as an OC Tanner representative, but also from his own personal wealth of experiences as well. So thanks, Alan, for joining us. Last but not least, I have Terence from Bank of Singapore. I think Bank of Singapore needs no introduction. Everyone knows. And he's, as you can see, has worked in a lot of banks himself. And he's going to speak up from not only from finance space, as a person who's running the Bank of Singapore, he's going to bring in a lot of thoughts in terms of talent acquisition and talent management. I think that's good. And he's worked, I mean, with several banks since 1985, when I think I was still in school. But I'm still very old. So Terence, you still look very young for your age. Thanks for that. All right. So this is what we're going to do. Let me stop the screen sharing so that everyone can see us. So we're going to chat. Let me just see everyone's on the panel. Okay, good. Okay, so before we start off, I was earlier talking about talent acquisition challenges, right, guys? So at this point in time, where many companies are restructuring or even downsizing, unfortunately, let me just, for the benefit of the participants, I'm also putting in the chat questions, the questions I'm going to be talking about in the chat button so that you guys have some feel for it, right? So some companies are in short of critical talents. I think today a lot of technology roles are in big demand, right? But at the same time, a lot of people are also have been displaced. So what are your specific talent acquisition challenges in this tough period? Maybe I'll start with Vicky.
Right. Okay. So we've been very lucky in that our business continues to thrive because we are a digital insurer, and our people have been working on many innovative products and solutions, both internally and externally. So our main, we're very lucky that our main problem right now is really retention of staff, rather than having to worry about protecting jobs, and so for us, we continue to offer opportunities for learning, encourage them, however which way, on the job, with a lot of the digital conferences, learning opportunities online now. Yeah, we encourage them to learn, and we have a lot of interesting problems to solve within the business. So we've been able to use that as a leverage to keep our critical talent. So I think we've been quite lucky in a sense. Yeah, in that our challenge is more about retaining and developing our people rather than protecting jobs.
Okay, so it's quite different from a lot of other companies. Terence, what is your specific talent acquisition challenge for Bank of Singapore, you think? Or maybe is even on behalf of other banks that you work with?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Kana, for inviting me, and good morning and good evening to everyone around the world. On the wealth management business, I'm very happy to share with you that the business is doing well. We have been able to adapt very quickly to the new normal. The staff are in very high morale. Clients are doing well, as you can see from the elevated markets, whether the stocks, the bonds, and the funds, and the private equity markets. And on the talent acquisition, we realize that we have to be very selective in this new normal. We don't think that we'll go back to the old normal. The hunting skill, the acquisition of new clients would require bankers with different kind of skill sets. People can go virtual, people can pitch and be able to market the bank's product and platform effectively, whether with existing clients or with new prospects. And basically, the use of technology of our centerpiece of our strategy. We will go digital, we'll go paperless, we will go ESG, and we will have interaction with clients less on a face-to-face basis. On the basis that the vaccine progress is still uncertain, we will have less travel, we'll have less seminars, but we have more webinars. So on that note, I think that the skill sets that we're looking for will probably be a little bit more varied compared to pre-COVID. And on that note, HR in BOS, management at BOS is actively recalibrating both the skill set of the existing staff through reinvention of themselves, through e-learning, And of course, on your question about the quality of candidates and the resumes, etc., we have a lot of resumes coming through. And thankfully for our business, all candidates have to be passed through by MES if we should onboard them. So there's a lot of due diligence, a lot of check and balances in the system. So far, the system has been very robust, and we have been getting the right people in the right places. Yeah, and the business is thriving.
Right, excellent. That's very positive outlook. Yeah, of course. So the MES checks. So we actually do the financial regulatory checks, and I can see
Absolutely.
huge volume of those checks coming as well.
Correct.
Alvin, as someone represents a lot of HR companies, HR people of various companies, what do you think are the specific talent acquisition challenges your member companies face?
I think there are two aspects over here. Let me break it down to both internal and external challenges itself. Right. Of course, externally, we know that the market right now is flush to some extent with talent right out there in the marketplace itself. And one of the key challenges that we see here in Singapore is the depth, right? The depth and breadth of digital experiences, all right, here in Singapore. And I think this is something that the greater ecosystem will need to address, right? Be it our education, be it our foreign talent policies itself that has been hogging the limelight for the last couple of months as well, about building a Singaporean core and so forth, on that front. So I think that's the external challenges that we are seeing. Number one, there's a shortage, all right, of capable people, right? But again, coming back to the ability to build, the ability to train, the ability to develop our own internal people to actually take on these new roles, I think is something that companies are also struggling with, all right, or having a few days in terms of trying to look at how best to actually pivot some of their employees towards this direction. So that's one key area. I think on the other hand itself, some of the internal challenges that I'm still seeing, and I'm still also talking to many of the business owners, the business heads, the talent acquisition partners, is that we tend to still create that problem for us by trying to find that perfect candidate. All right. And they want the best of everything. They want it at, in Singapore, the colloquial language, right? ITIP in Hokkien words, right? One it good and one it cheap, right? So I think this is the internal challenge that we have created for ourselves, right? By trying to find the best candidate, right, at the lowest price, okay, wherever possible. And this is still a recurring, oh my God, it's like OMG, year 2020, and we're still talking about all these kind of things. It's like, I was telling this guy, hey, come on, no, there's never going to be a perfect candidate out there. All right. And I think we really need to move away from the mindset of trying to acquire talent at having the best of everything is not going to be possible. Yeah. So this is the internal challenge that was created by our own processes and our own procedures and lack of knowledge. I think this is what's really happening right now in terms of some of the companies that SHRI work together with.
Okay. And I think this is not just a Singapore thing. We work with a lot of, I speak in other conferences, other regions. There's one conference, I think it's a European conference, where they were saying there's no such thing as a perfect husband, perfect wife. So that's coming into the employees as well. Alan, what are your thoughts on this, Alan?
Yeah, thanks, Kenan. And yes, echo Terence's, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. So I've got two views on this. One, I'll just talk from an OC Tanner point of view, and then maybe a bit broader than that. Right. So for OC Tanner, we haven't really, certainly in APAC, haven't really seen much in the way of challenge in terms of talent acquisition. Clearly, there's been plenty of challenge itself with the pandemic. I would say our biggest challenge has been one that we always have, and that's finding talent that has a good fit with our culture. So at OC Tanner, we're very much about focusing on people before profit, and hiring for culture, hiring for cultural fit first, and then skill set second. Clearly, you need a skill set, but culture fit first. And that's something we've done for a long time. And if I was to look at the broader market, that's a trend which is growing, and there's lots of there's lots of momentum building around people coming into organisations and staying in organisations is about cultural fit. And as Alvin just talked about, you try and find the perfect candidate. There is no perfect candidate, but if you're going to, there's no use in hiring somebody with great skills if they're a poor cultural fit, because they'll either leave quickly or they'll bring other people down, because your culture will be one of tolerating people that don't behave in the right way. So we are on the side of cultural fit, find the right skill set. You can teach skills. It's hard to teach cultural fit and how people's personal values align with those of your organisation.
Okay, thanks for that. Jeremy, I know you guys do a lot of hiring in the region, right? Myanmar, Malaysia, Singapore, and all that. So any specific TA challenges you guys see?
Yes, I think I'll speak from a SME viewpoint, especially in the ICT sector. I'll just start off from Singapore. I think internally, I think the first thing is retention, as what Vicky has mentioned also. Because if we can't retain, or we can't retain our talents per se, it will lead to increased talent acquisition efforts, right? So if we look at in terms of the talents we have in the industry itself now, the demands they have in terms of companies is no longer just what you can pay. Some of the challenge I face here is also not just being offering a right package, but also looking into employer branding, looking at employee experience, and these are things which we have to grow as a HR, right? Yeah. Coming back to the talent acquisition side, looking at Singapore per se, there was this article which mentioned about Minister Vivian Balakrishnan mentioning that there's around 200,000 ICT professionals in Singapore, and we are looking at 60,000 more talents in the next 3 years. Our education system can only produce 2,008 talents a year. Right, that itself means that there's a shortfall in talents, and this itself creates a challenge for us as SMEs.
Right.
Because when there's a high demand and a low supply per se, it becomes more expensive. And how much more can we pay? One thing which I'm lucky at Justlogin, we managed to got on the SG United Traineeship Program. Yeah. Managed to bring in 7 very inspiring young talents on board. All right, and I think this is one challenge as SME. We will train, we'll groom talents, but we try our best to retain them. Right. Try our best to make a great place for them to work. However, there's always that challenge, which is there would be better companies out there with a greater or a more what you call that, a better package to attract them over. So this is a challenge for SME. Right. Attract and seem to be able to retain. Yeah.
Right. I think talking about so a lot of countries, I think especially in Singapore, the government gives a lot of support. So amidst companies retrenching and downsizing, I think in Avvanz we're expanding, we're employing more and more people, but that's only been possible because of a lot of government grant support. But I think you mentioned about employer branding, and I need to bring Vicky into this picture because Singlife became Asia's best companies to work for in Asia 2020, right? So you must have something to say about this.
Wow, yes. Where do I start? All right, so employer branding is, for us, something that comes very naturally. We didn't actually focus on employer branding per se, but to Alan's point, right, the culture fit was very important, right? So in this past year with the pandemic and having to recruit virtually, onboard people virtually, I mean, half of our people this year are new. They joined this year. Some of them haven't even been to the office, right? And they've only just seen their teams virtually. And how did we manage to win that award? I mean, we participated in the award about 1 to 2 months ago, so very late in the year. And, so I've also been thinking, wow, how did we did that? Wow, it's such a wonderful award, right? So my reflections on the employer brand has been really much around, I think all of us as organizations, as leaders, right, we have to really think about the compelling vision for why our business or our company exists.
Yes.
That is fundamental.
Very important.
Right? Yeah. And the founders or the leadership team are the ones who need to embrace that, right? Or to articulate that. So you need a compelling vision, and you need leaders who are believers in that vision. Right. So at Singlife, again, very lucky, have a great founder, Walter, who has a compelling vision. He just wanted to build a better kind of life insurance company. Started simple, and said, how do we make it accessible? Right. So, and on that note, we started to hire. We looked for people who believed in the vision, who wanted to make a difference, and we're not afraid of that. So, and I think naturally over time, we hired for culture fit. Absolutely, attitude and culture fit, and then of course for skill sets, absolutely. But like Alan says, we can train on skill sets, but we looked for people who were curious, wanted to expand their minds, and wanted to make a difference, and that naturally grew into a brand. When I started about a year ago, it was hard to recruit for Singlife. It was like, Singlife, who is that? It's like Sintel, Singpost, you all kind of related, red logo and all that. But like, no.
Yeah.
But now a year later, it's I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's a lot easier than it was a year ago, because people have heard of us and they approach us and they say, can we, we hear, your employees empowered, can we join? So it's a lot easier from a year ago. And so that kind of evolved very naturally from us, because we started with a compelling vision and leaders who are believers.
Yeah, actually, we ourselves as a younger company, I mean, and I can add to you were saying you're onboarding people whom we have not even come to the office. So we just onboarded some people in our Philippines office, Brazil office, have not met them in person yet, right? So I understand their feeling. But I think it's a new world, so everyone's accepting it. We opened a very nice big office in Avvanz, Philippines last year, and we were celebrating the 1-year anniversary virtually. It's that beautiful office, all done. We did a big bang, rah last year. But talking about that, now the younger generation, the millennials, I think they like to work for the younger companies, because although we're a small, medium enterprise, maybe a medium enterprise, but we get a lot of resumes coming into our inbox, right? So I think now a lot of people also like to work for, maybe it's a bit of, there's this joke somebody was saying, when you're picking up a girl and you say in the bar, oh, I work for a startup, it's like, sounds very cool. So, so there's a bit of an X factor there, I think. So I think, so because of that, I think now younger companies probably also getting a lot of profiles. But with the new, there's a lot of digital nomads, a lot of freelancing, part-timing positions. People like to work for many companies. So with a lot of talents out there, maybe this question, I will also put it to, let me just put it in the chat here. So more and more talents coming on. Do you think freelancing part-time positions will increase? And how about the millennials and Gen Z? Maybe I want to put this question to Alan.
Great, thank you. So I think at a summary level, I think the trend is going to continue. The trend towards more flexible working, whether you want to call it gig, the gig economy, or it's just more flexible working, they're all very similar things. And that is people coming into the workforce and even already in the workforce are looking for more flexibility in their workplace. So I certainly see that will continue. It's certainly going to be with the millennials and the Gen Zs. But at the end of the day, regardless of whether they are gig economy, whether they are permanent people that are working more flexibly, what's going to be really important is the type of experience that organisations can create for them, and not thinking about an employee life cycle, because the research we've done at OC Tanner would suggest this concept of employee life cycle is a bit outdated. It's now about employees, whether they're permanent or not, are looking for everyday experiences that influence how they feel over time. So I certainly see it continuing, and I think organisations need to embrace it because the inclusivity. They need to show that they can be diverse in terms of their hiring practices. They need to be inclusive. They need to have a more flexible model, and that is certainly going to continue.
Okay. And the other thing we've noted, and this is not the first time we're seeing this, in previous recessions or a period, we've always seen resume discrepancies do go up. So in Avvanz, based on the last 5 years of data, we see out of every 10 profiles, at least about 3 to 4, but 35% of them do have some resume discrepancies, right? People could be faking their employment, joining day, leaving dates, titles, certificates, faking big time. Which is why I think we're going to launch our blockchain ledger in January to verify credentials very quickly. And then in social media, you find disturbing insights on people. People fake, they don't declare their bankruptcies or criminals. A lot of discrepancies going up. So I want to ask this question to Terence, because in the banking industry, at least with the financial institutions that we work with, we know that you have zero tolerance for resume discrepancies like that. So how do you guys combat this other than your MAS, FinRec, background checks? Other than that, what else do you guys do to combat this?
Well, first and foremost is that our hiring process is very stringent and very vigorously being tested. And we work with third-party providers to interview to candidates as well, to the extent that we're going to make sure that the resume discrepancy is to the minimum. The other good thing, of course, that within our business, every candidate that passes through the system have to apply for what they call an RNF license through the MES. And MES would have a lot of the background checks as well to kind of verify to make sure that the dots are being aligned and the information that is given are complete and true. So I think that so far everything is working out very well. I do not have a situation whereby we have any discrepancies in terms of what we expect from the candidate and what was being presented to us.
Okay, that's good. In terms of what do you call wrongful talents, like for example, we know that hiring the wrong talents not only pose business risks, but also financial risk, reputational risks. And we cannot afford such wrongful hires in these times, right? So especially now, even for SMEs, like we have a lot of SMEs coming into our platform ordering background checks, and we see that and sometimes some are small SMEs, when we ask them, how come you're doing this? And their reply typically is, for us, it's even more important to do background checks because the moment we get one wrong hire, it can wipe off a portion of our revenue in a year, right? So I think the traditional talent acquisition methods maybe is not good enough, which is why now they're putting in other measures like these. So Alvin, you work with a lot of medium-sized enterprises as well. What are some of the measures you think these SMEs can take to address such business risk attributed to wrongful hires?
You see, definitely, the SMEs, if you really look at the HR department or the almost non-existence of a HR department in the SMEs, all right, many of the SMEs that I've actually worked with in the past itself, you have a HR manager who's also the finance manager, who's also the admin manager. And at times, sometimes they're also the babysitters for the CEOs, all right? Yeah, that's the reality of it, right? If you pop down to the industrial parks itself, like in Jurong and somewhere, when you talk to the HR guy and you realize that they're also the finance person itself. So if one person is doing 2 to 3 persons job, all right, the time available to actually look at strategic hiring and reference checks and everything, I can tell you honestly, hand to heart, is just going to be a Google search at most, all right, or self-declaration, okay, in terms of, that's about it. But the fact is that the HR tech ecosystem has grown so much, right, over the last 4 to 5 years here in Singapore. And we have you guys like Avvanz who actually does all this reference check. So the SMEs itself would be better educated and be in a better position in terms of talent acquisition. And you clearly pointed out, like what Terence said, one wrong hire could wipe you out kind of thing. I think it's important then to actually leverage on the HR tech ecosystem, all right, and as a service provider, all right, because understanding that I do not have the capacity and capability itself, and reference checks itself these days is not something that is going to cost a couple of thousands itself, right?
It's $100 sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So why? And I think it's just a matter of educating, a matter of being aware of availability of what's out there in the HR ecosystem, especially in the HR tech, for the SMEs to actually leverage. All right. And we also are hearing a lot of the SMEs these days, they are offshoring their work, right? In the region, countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, Batam even to some extent, right? So it's more vital and critical for the SME sectors to then actually leverage on the know-how, on the skill sets of the HR tech guys and conduct all these necessary reference checks, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we don't end up like the movie Catch Me If You Can, where he's able to jump job to job without being background checked on, right?
Exactly.
So you never know. You do not know what you don't know, right?
Exactly. Imagine you don't do a reference check on pilot, right? Catch Me If You Can. He was a pilot.
Canon, do you mind if I just jump in with a comment there as well? And this is, I think a lot of HR tech companies have this issue, and it's not just at the SME level. I think it goes right through to large enterprise, and that is the when you're, and we're a HR tech company, so we're certainly feeling this, is that you don't need to make many bad hires for, they say they can't afford the investment to bring the right HR tech into the business, but it's a false economy, because you don't need to make too many bad hires for you to have had a lot of risk or a lot of cost to your business. So I think what would be great is if SMEs and Alvin in his consulting capacity could help these organisations understand that it is a false economy. There is the return on investment. You need to understand return on investment is not just the obvious return on investment. It's there's an opportunity cost, a risk cost that needs to be considered as well. As if you don't, what could happen?
Yeah, actually, we developed a calculator to prove this because by background checking, the ROI can be more than 300% because cost of fraud, cost of reputational damage. And there's also another Forrester study, I think, which says that background check people tend to stay with the company for more than a year as well. And today, that's very important because I think a lot of us know in a resume now, people jumping jobs every 6 months has become another new normal, which is quite scary, right? When I started my career in 1996, people said that, the last job you were there for 3 years, are you a job hopper? Today, 3 years is good, right? Because people are jumping every 3 years.
3 years is long service
Long
nowadays.
service, yeah. So, and of course, some companies, especially in tech and all that, I think they do like people who have jumped jobs for some reason every 3 years, 5 years, because they feel they have a lot more exposure, right? So different strokes for different people. So we talked about talent acquisition. We talked about background screening is an important component. Now I want to talk about another important one. In terms of what kind of redeployment strategies do you think a company should take to prevent layoffs? This is a very sensitive one. Jeremy, what do you think a good redeployment strategy can be to prevent laying off people?
Right. So far, I'm quite lucky at Justlogin. Its business has been going well during this period. I mean, there's a demand for HR tech. But coming from our own personal experience, the first company I had to work with, I had to retrench the entire company.
God.
So coming to retrenchment or let's say layoffs, I think as a HR and in today's context, a business-centric HR, we need to have that pulse of the business. We need to understand in terms of, is there a going concern for the business? What's the risk we have in the short to mid-term? And that's where we make the decision to say, do we freeze hiring? All right. Do we protect jobs? Because there are companies which come in, go big, go bust, and what happens?
Yeah.
Right? So I think there has to be a conscious effort in terms of knowing, in terms of the business where we're heading. Internally, wise, we also have to be, I mean, there would be times where we have to make certain decisions to lay off, to let's say, I think there's quite a few companies, and you look at it, Robinson, things like this, who passed during this period. But I think the most important thing for HR and management is to be open. We are facing an issue, be open with it, upfront with it, let them know what's the situation, let them know that what are we doing, what's the time frame, and what's the plans we have for them.
Basically, very honest, like the way the Airbnb CEO did, right? Very, very personal and all that.
Yeah.
I think I would like Terence to add on this as well from the banking sector. what kind of redeployment strategy a company should take?
I think that as much as we like to kind of provide our staff with a very overall skill set and training in this new environment, one of the major initiatives we are doing is to try to get our people to go digital in a lot of the initiatives and work streams. And on that note, we are trying to harness as much of the internal talent pool in combination with the talent from the outside on certain areas where we are lacking, so as to bring out the best of the combination. We do not foresee going back to the old normal. We are going digitalization in whatever we can. We are going paperless in whatever areas we can to try to make sure that we will be competitive going forward. Whatever we can do online, we will go online. So on that note, because of the journey that we are embarking, and it's going to be a multi-year journey, we are looking forward to train our people so that wherever talent we try to harness, they are being spotted and they are being kind of groomed and nurtured so that we can actually get them on this journey. There's been very little attrition among our staff. We try to deploy it as effectively as we can within the framework of our ambitions.
Yeah, very good, very good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was also thinking, right, the redeployment strategy, I mean, in current times, it's a very reactive process. I mean, and we can't help it, the economy has just really changed drastically. But I think also, like, just for SMEs, right, it's also about redeployment mindset. So at Singlife, we set the expectations with staff, right, with our employees that you might be hired for a particular role, but the expectation is that you are curious and you need to learn, and you need to learn to do about outside of the box of the role that you're in today, simply because we will never have the luxury of hundreds and hundreds of headcount to do very specialized functions. So if there are participants here who are from an SME organization, the mindset is really to inculcate that a redeployment mindset. So people are always continuously on the lookout for how they can add more value rather than wait for a crisis to happen.
Yeah. So I can add to that as well, because I do a lot of digital transformation consulting work for a lot of companies, training and consulting, and we always talk about unlearn, relearn, and learn again, learn new things, right? So a lot of them are very worried that they're going to lose their jobs to RPA software, to chatbots. Customer service roles are going away. Because nowadays the chatbots like the Google Assistant can have very, very realistic conversations, can even speak in some of the colloquial local languages now, right? So what's going to happen to people? So we always talk about, you cannot have the mindset, the last 30 years were good, next 30 years is going to be good for me as well. It's a new mindset, digital mindset, right? So it's about repurposing the roles as well. So having said that, moving on to another thing, I think a lot of us now, I think some of you also, some are working from home, some are from back to office. There's a new term this week, I read one of the papers talking about it. They call WFH not work from home, they call it work from hell, which is quite sad. Maybe because there's just too much, maybe it's got to do with an earlier point I talked about where my brother said there's a lot of divorce cases going up, right? So in terms, I'm going to show you a little screen here. And so this is pulled up from one of the press articles. So they did a survey on, would you like to continue working from home, right? So 35% said 3/4 of the usual work time. They want to work only 75% of the usual work time. And then, of course, some people, 15% said all of the time they would like to work from home. So interestingly, 10% said I do not want to work from home at all, which I think is a large percentage, right? Every 100 people, 10 people do not want to work from home. So it must be a lot of people. I think my office is in the right in the city center, and I see the buzz is all back. People are very happy being back. So suddenly, a lot of them are who used to wish to work from home, now they really want to be back to office, right? And then the reasons were to continue working from home. A lot of them said they want to spend more time with family, no need to commute to the office, especially in some other countries like Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, where like some of my staff used to take about 3 to 4 hours just to get to the office, right? But increasing flexibility due to not being stuck in the office is another thing. So different strokes for different people. But having said that, right, what in your office, what is, or even after this pandemic, right, how do you guys, and the other thing is a lot of big companies, all the FANGs, a lot of FANGs companies, Facebook and all that, have said that they're going to continue to work from home arrangements, which is a bad news for the property industry. But the response for the workforce is obviously mixed. So what is your WFH? I'm not going to say work from home or work from home versus BTO, back to office strategy. Maybe I want to throw the question to Alan. Talk to us from the Australia perspective, because I also read that a lot of properties in the outskirts, people are moving out to Queensland and all that, property prices are going up. So tell us more, Alan.
Yeah. Even in Melbourne into regional Victoria, people are moving. First thing I'll say is I think the slide that you put up there in terms of the stats, that's a point in time. I expect that to change. So we will go with a flexible model. We've always worked reasonably flexibly before the pandemic. We will come out of it working pretty flexibly. It will take a while to come out of it, but I expect that, my expectation is all the people that can come to the office do at least some point in the week to connect with colleagues and so on. But for some people, it will be a long time at home and a short time in the office, and others it'll be the other way around. Me personally, I'll probably be one of those. I like being around my people in the office. So we will go with a flexible model, and I think now's not the right time for organisations to be making decisions about giving up commercial property and so on, because I think once some people start heading back to the office, people that are working from home, there's a bit of FOMO. What am I missing out on when I'm at home? The water cooler chat, that sort of thing. What am I missing out on? I think we will see a shift over time to whilst they'll still be flexible, but some of the people that were working from home or wanted to will shift back to spending some time in the office.
Okay. I know in SMEs, a lot of them have this mindset that very small enterprises, if I don't stay in the office means you're not working. So for them, it's a big struggle to move to this hybrid working arrangement. So Alvin, you work with a lot of these SMEs as well. So what is going on there? Are people open to this hybrid, or come on, back to office now?
We've been honestly, when we saw the signs that COVID was going to go global itself, back in January itself, and when the first notices that will start to come out itself, SHRI itself, we gave a talk on it, and I actually mentioned, organizations would have to really, or rather business leaders itself would really have to really manage and balance out between the organization's economic health versus the health of their workforce, all right? And at that point of time, of course, it was before circuit breaker itself, right? So, and I think a lot of the SMEs were also struggling, all right? Where do we go from there? From there in January, just before Chinese New Year itself, and I really like to take and applaud, the government's direction that, okay, let's go circuit breaker on the 7th of April, right? This date, 7th of April, that was the date whereby Singapore went on the circuit breaker itself. It was not an easy decision to be made for most of us and for most of the organizations itself, right? So until itself, and during this period itself, I think globally, organizations, workforce has found ways around brick walls or traditional brick walls, right? That what was not possible is now possible in terms of being able to work from home. And the employees and the workforce are very comfortable to some extent, right? Organizations themselves, business leaders themselves are also adopting and accepting that, my employees can still remain productive. But the caveat here is that we took some time to get our infrastructure up, all right? Productivity did suffer, all right, at the start of the circuit breaker here in Singapore. But when our infrastructure was gaining traction and mature over time, people were getting used to using technology like Zoom, MS Teams. People were more accustomed to forming their own work teams, all right, and support groups, all right? We are seeing a lot of the SMEs here in Singapore getting very comfortable to be able to work from home, right? And I think that's where your data actually shows balance that people want to work from home, but yet, be able to have the luxury to go back to the office, all right?
Yeah.
So as to not, as what Alan said, FOMO, right? Fear of missing out on small little parties, small little gatherings,
the water cooler talk, the pantry talk, the gossip.
Exactly. So I think it's a good balance, and I think this is going to be the new norm that is going to take place. All right, property prices, commercial property prices aside, I think that is the way that we should be operating within. All right, because it has proven that with the pandemic itself, we have really moved from second, third gear to fifth gear, almost like that over a 7-month period in terms of the adoption of technology.
Yeah.
All right.
That's why I call COVID the catalyst, right? When the lockdown happened, we called ourselves, I said this before, so in the chat you can see it. I call COVID, in Avvanz, we call it the company's virtually deployed teams, right? The COVID, because that's how everyone works. And people who said that, oh, I do need to fly in to see my client. I do need to see my people in person. Now, now the COVID teams are happening everywhere. So people are now accustomed to the new way of working. But there are also business, sorry, go ahead.
Now, the funny thing is that, even from a rewards perspective, all right, and here in Singapore itself, a lot of the companies are taking away transport allowance and parking it into home allowance, right? So traveling and flying overseas to see a client, I think it's going to take a back seat, definitely, right? And I think it's more productive that we have Zoom meetings like this for client engagement.
Yes.
Right? I think, and it's accepted globally right now these days.
Yeah. And at this point, I want to talk about engagement as well, because engaging, and I want Alan to answer this in a short while, because you do a lot of rewards recognition and all that, right? Engaging people in these times is a lot more important because PTSD, people have a lot of mental stress. And I've talked about this in previous conferences as well, where what are some of the ideas to engage people, right? So in Avvanz, for example, we send food to people's homes. We have like a resident guy who sings for everyone, and we have a dancing competition. We do stuff like, I mean, these are ways to engage people because now we don't have that weekly beer gatherings or events or whatever, right? And then when the mental stress came about, that's me showing off my push-ups, but I wanted to bring the awareness of PTSD. So I passed on the challenge of 25 straight push-ups in 25 seconds to everyone in the world. And at the same time, we also want to do more like virtual cocktails. So we sent out the cocktails to, again, I'm not practicing drinking, so I'm going to be very careful, put a disclaimer, banking sector guys in this call, but I just want to say that it's a way to, get sort of enjoy yourself, right? So we brought a bartender in, and then he teaches how to mix drinks. So a lot of different ways of engaging. So I think engaging people it's super important now at these times. So Alan, what do you think companies should do more to be able to engage people? Because I think now with the PTSD, mental stress and all that, it's super important, right? So what are your thoughts and ideas?
Oops, sorry. So I think what organisations, they need to have a focus on modern leadership. They need to look at overhauling their leadership structures and their skill sets and behaviours of their leaders, because research we've done shows that leaders that exhibit those modern behaviours, which are trust, transparency, and so on, that plays a really big role in how people are engaged. And then they're also the types of leaders that connect frequently with their employees in terms of one-to-ones and those types of things, which is something we've kept up really strongly through the COVID time that we've been going through. And they're also the sorts of leaders that connect. We talked about right at the start about purpose and purpose-driven organisations, the sorts of leaders that can connect employees with the purpose of an organisation. Is you can have a CEO that has a vision, and you've got employees that need something to connect the two. And so you've got modern leadership, which plays a number of roles. Modern leadership are the sort that recognise and appreciate their employees. They're the sort of leaders that are clear and transparent with their employees about how they're going through one-to-ones and so on. And yes, reward and recognition plays a role in that, but it's about open communication. As I said, if you roll it all up to modern leadership traits and modern leadership behaviours, that plays a big role, and our research evidences that strongly.
Yeah, I think you even had there is a report I think you shared. Maybe I'll put that up on the screen as well, where it talks about. Maybe you want to just talk very briefly about this.
So we produce a global culture report every year. It's a year-round piece of research. It gets released at a global conference that we do in around September, October time. And what we found in the research we did in this last year was, the research we've done over the last couple of years has identified these 6 talent magnets, which are the things that draw people to an organisation. And if you look at the way organisations have scored against these talent magnets in this last sort of 8 or 9 months, organisations generally, the sentiment of employees around the world has dropped. And this is a piece of research is about 40,000 employees and leaders that are researched as part of this. But what we found was that organisations that had a thriving culture going into the pandemic, going into COVID, have fared a lot stronger than the organisations that didn't have a thriving culture. And a thriving culture is one where people feel connected, strong, modern leadership behaviours, people feel like they have opportunity and they have a strong sense of their leaders and they're connected to purpose. So we could talk about this for hours, but just to sort of summarise it, is the organisations really need to start thinking about the culture they're creating, the culture they're fostering, and the role of their leaders, not their CEOs and their owners, but their mid-level leaders, their senior leaders, all the way through the organisation, the role that they play to connect people to the organisation.
Right. All right. Great. I know we are running out of time. We're putting up questions, but I just want to do one more. This is a question which came up just today, one of the registrants, right? How do you think companies can convince senior management to adopt the latest technologies for talent acquisition and talent management, especially when the companies are smaller companies? How do you think they can convince the senior management? Maybe I'd like to hear from Jeremy and then Alvin as well. Yeah.
Okay, so I agree with what I draw back from what Alvin said, which is you go to SMEs in Singapore, you HRs, they're usually a combination of administrative, finance, and HR people, right? So that's where technology comes in to supplement them in their work. And if you look at it in the HR, the HR tech ecosystem in Singapore or even globally per se, the cost is not that much. For the days where taking up a platform cost, a system costs you in the range of thousands of dollars. I was just looking at Power BI and just taking up is at $10 per month for one user. So I think this low cost of barrier and being open with the management, sharing with them in terms of what are the values, what are the things you can gain out of it. I think that itself makes it an easier conversation. But HR must know what we want.
Of course.
Yeah.
Alvin, what do you think?
So I think the way to approach, right, if you think about it, all this while management has pushed back because we are approaching the pitching of it wrongly. All right. We come always from this is a good project, this is a good initiative, and so forth. The lingo that we need to engage our business leaders itself is, of course, the language of business itself, right? And rather than pitching it as an idea, I think we need to come in from a business perspective. What will be the uplift in terms of productivity, in terms of business ROI? Come from a financial perspective, if you are comfortable with numbers. Come from a perspective that, what are the risks involved in not doing, and of course, maybe possibly of adopting the system, but also addressing all with the risk figures with the mitigating issues as well. I think that really works, be it, even at listed corporates, and even at SMEs. If you come from a business perspective, you have a common understanding through a common language. Right? I think the adoption of technology in your workplace will be an easier sell right? Rather than coming in from, oh, HR, you know, this and that, this and that. I don't think that is the way to actually go about doing something.
All right.
You want
Fantastic.
to adopt technology.
Good word of advice. Terence, what is your advice? I'm going to give you 30 seconds each to parting comments. What is the word of advice in terms of talent acquisition, engagement, talent management, talent development for companies out there?
I think that it's important that you have and cultivate the right culture for the bank, for the organization.
Yeah.
It is very important that technology and digitalization is the centerpiece going forward. It is important to keep the eco-space vibrant, whether internally or externally. At Bank of Singapore, almost on a weekly basis, we're webinars on an external basis with our clients and with our prospects and with our what we call eco partners. Internally, we have a lot of events, whether it's birthday celebrations on a virtual basis or we have get-togethers. We have a lot of work, what we call work streams, WhatsApp group chats, either on investments, or on compliance, or just basic processes of improvements and implementation. We have MS Teams to make sure that everybody are in group discussions for improvements and for strategies going forward. So I think in short, it's important that the people are engaged in this so-called new environment. People feel that they are being taken care of. People don't feel they are neglected. So the mental health is strong. We also consistently have HR programs on wellness, whether it's eating right, sleeping well, having intermittent rest and naps, you know. I think the idea is to keep this whole eco space strong, bright, and people feel energized. Yeah, I think that's the key message I want to bring to everybody. That in the post-COVID environment, the workspace will probably be downsized. People are probably working more at home. At Bank of Singapore, as a matter of interest, we are not going back to 100%. We are currently at 70%. And eventually, I think the feedback from most of the staff is that they're very happy working 50-50, flexi hour, flexi days.
Nice. Okay, good. And I think I agree with the balancing of, I mean, the 50-50 is good because otherwise you end up working or overworking at home, right?
Yep.
Like for me, I used to travel very regularly. Now with hardly any traveling, I'm in laptop more, and I started getting joint issues and all that. As you can see, I'm wearing bands all over. Vicky, what is
So to get investment in HR tech, I know it's the hardest thing for many HR people to do. So one of the reasons I always use is I guarantee you, it will help reduce overhead on your time as a manager because you spend less time doing management administration.
Okay, anyone else anything to add? Alvin, Jeremy, Alan? No? Okay. Alan, you have anything else to add to this before we close off?
I'd just like to add one thing, and it's sort of following on a little bit from Terence. And I think that the time is now for an organisation's external brand and internal brand they need to align. So if you're looking to attract talent, retain talent, or particularly attract talent, it's far too easy for candidates to get a sense of what the internal culture of an organisation looks like. So organisations, you can't pretend to be a certain way externally and be a different way internally. Those things need to align. You need to walk the talk. You need to create, foster strong cultures that look after people's well-being, that have appreciation and recognition at the core, have modern leadership. Those things, people need to be able to see that from outside, and they will only see it from outside if you're actually living it internally.
Okay, thanks for that. I think this is another problem of working on a webinar, right? I made you all work an extra 5 minutes. That's what we're talking about. We need to be balanced. So I appreciate your time. The participants, amazing. A lot of questions coming in. What we will do is we will try to answer all that offline. Thanks to Alvin, Vicky, Jeremy, Alan, and Terence for making time, especially this special webinar for us because it's the last one for the year. Because I think we have enough of webinar fatigue. So no more webinars until end of the year, maybe only webinar-based training. I want to wish a very, very Merry Christmas to everyone and a Happy New Year. I think 2021, let's all be positive. In Chinese, they say, right? So let's be more optimistic that it's going to be a much more fantastic year next year. So thanks to you all and have a fantastic rest of the week and a weekend as well. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kanan.
Thank you, Kanan, and everyone else. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
70%.